Okay, we are live. Welcome to the Supper Hero podcast. I'm Jono Proudfoot, and today we have Shaun Vaso and Sam Bell, both keto coaches. Sam, I have to punt, works for Real Meal Revolution. She's our program coordinator, little keto nut. And these two maniacs just walked/ran 160 kilometers over 5 days without eating a single calorie. What the actual F? And they're here to tell us about their journey. So first up, I have to know, like, when I'm about to run, I like to eat something that's very easy to digest, and I know that I'm going to have a meal afterwards. What do you eat as your last meal before 5 days of no eating and lots of exercise? And Shaun, you go first.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Yeah.
What a fantastic journey. Well, we started off with our last supper, which was on the Thursday afternoon, late afternoon. We actually had a good old South African barbecue, a braai. We focused on getting some high-fat proteins in, and for the most part, protein and fats was our last meal. And if I remember correctly, I ate as much as I could before. And proteins, most certainly proteins and fat.
And I don't know if this is too premature, but why protein and fat and not carbohydrates a la 90s?
Well, I mean, sorry, Sam, I'm just going to jump in here quickly, is that we were going to show that our bodies run on fuel, fat as a fuel. So it made sense just to put as much fuel into our body as we could, and not rely on carbohydrates, because one thing we do know is that carbohydrates that you put into your body don't last very long. It gets depleted within 2 or 3 hours if you do exercise. So, and the point of this whole exercise was to show that our body is properly fueled by fat. So put in the proteins and the fat.
Cool. So Shaun, I know you ran. Sam, you walked. Tell us about walking versus running and why you decided to walk.
So my aim was to stay in my fat burning zone rather than getting into any top end speeds that might deplete glycogen stores instead of fat stores. So that was my main objective. And to that end, that's why we sort of like topped up on protein prior to the start of the event, so that when we did tap into glycogen stores, there were actually glycogen stores for us to tap into in the form of the protein. So that was my main aim, was stay in that fat burning zone. Don't go into the anaerobic, and just try and maintain that sort of like fat fueled state.
Okay, got it. And you got, how many people were there in total? Because you two are the founders, but you had a team, right?
There was 8 of us that started out. 8 of us that did the fasting training and the running training and the walking training. And then, unfortunately, a whole lot of logistical issues saw 2 casualties from Joburg who weren't able to fly in on time. And then we had 2 injuries sort of like midway and like the day, the second last day, which saw 4 of us finishing.
Okay, so 50% success rate, which is pretty good, because it's not like a chilled thing to just not eat and do all that exercise. Shaun, I know that it's going to come out, but you didn't manage to finish the run. What happened?
Oh, correct. I was one of the casualties right at the end. At the end of the 4th day, like with 1 kilometer to go, I managed to pull a calf muscle, which was quite bad. That kept me out. And your previous question as to, or Sam talked about fat oxidation range and so forth, and I was a runner. So the first day I went out and I just ran at about 6 minutes a K, which was quite obviously I did 34 Ks in 3.5 hours. It was, and I felt good. It was really fine. But then obviously I started eating into my glycogen stores, and I got more and more fatigued as the days went by, and probably why I ended up getting injured. But the injury most certainly had nothing to do with the fact that we were fasted. It was purely a muscle injury. And my interesting experience was that, as you said, I was a runner. I started off running, and then as the days progressed, I actually started walking more often, so that I could preserve my glycogen stores, and stay in the fat oxidation range. And that was a very, very interesting experience for me as to exactly how fast do I travel to stay in that range, and quite naturally be able to ascertain that. Which was great to see where that was my experience of where my body starts burning glycogen and burning fat, which is great.
And interestingly, I had the opposite experience. So I started really, really slow. In fact, I was the shortest by far of all these giants that I was walking with. And so their walk was like a little bit of a trot for me to keep up. But my experience was that I felt stronger and had more stamina, and actually got into a trot and a run more regularly as the days progressed.
So you went out the starting blocks fast, Shaun, and Sam finished fast. And so, Shaun, just to go back to this point, because my mind's churning as well. You're saying that there was no connection between nutrition, or the absence thereof, and the injury. The injury was a result of the way you managed your exertion over a 5-day stage race, basically. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Sorry, carry on. No.
Yeah, we do. Just to confirm that, we had a biokineticist with us all the way, and that was really confirmed by not just the researchers, but also the biokineticist that said my injury was absolutely because of overstraining the muscle, and which we were concerned about. We would say, we were fasted. Did that have an impact or not? And according to the scientists, most certainly wasn't the issue for us.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so you had Heidi, she pulled out, is that right? Or one other?
Yeah, so Heidi was the second. Heidi was the second injury, and what happened is a month before race day, she twisted her ankle, and she had like some foot pain and that. So she was nursing that back to health, and it was the biggest focus for her. And on day 3, an old knee injury. She had a knee reconstructed, I think it was 10 years ago or something. And it was the knee that her ankle ended up being fine, her foot ended up being fine, and then, some old injury came and resurfaced. Again, nothing to do with the fasting, but again, overexertion.
Shaun, I remember one of the things that I said in the WhatsApp group was that because you said, if I'm right, you could have actually finished, but you decided not to because you could have caused permanent damage. Is that right?
Yeah, I was advised by my kineticist to rather not go ahead because I would have further aggravated the injury most certainly.
But everyone who fell out or stayed in remained fasted. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Heidi actually flew back to Durban with her family, who all wanted to celebrate, and she was like, another 24 hours, please.
Really?
Yeah.
She broke her fast with the rest of us.
Wow. So let's talk about breaking the fast. Let's talk about that. So how did you break the fast? What was the kind of nutrition like after the event? How do you refuel, and what kind of recovery did you go through? Sam, maybe you can start.
So the approach was that we hadn't engaged our digestion for 5 days, and that to suddenly give it a full proper meal, could be quite damaging to the gut. So we took a handful of mixed nuts and 2 boiled eggs and had that an hour before our first meal, just to sort of like start the engines of the digestion factory. And what we've observed in our fasting training program was that starting up that digestion engine tends to slow down the body and the brain as it engages the digestion. So we didn't want to hit the wall straight after the race. So we wanted to gently ease our digestion in. And then we all ate at the venue, that fabulous Kwatu. And I think most of us had a piece of meat with some veggies, Shaun, if I recall.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had a varied. We just ate a la carte. People just what they wanted. I mean, I still had 2 glasses of white wine after that. It's not as if I nursed. I didn't nurse we had the 2 eggs and the nuts. And Sam said, "That's fine. We can do that." And then after that, it's carte blanche. So I just had most of us just had meals, and I even said, "Well, let's have a glass of wine to celebrate." And everything was fine. Didn't have any problems refeeding the system.
And Shaun, how have you found sort of refeeding in the days following that? Because this was a week ago, right? You finished on Tuesday last week. So what has the last week been like for you, eating-wise?
It's been very interesting. I mean, as you alluded to, I'm an avid low carber, and I stay away from sugar a lot. I just found that in refeeding, I was very responsible in refeeding, but also I was very tempted to eat just about everything. I mean, I wanted to eat. Psychologically, I think I wanted to eat. But that's it. Then other than that, eating normally. And the other thing as well that was very interesting for me, I mean, we ended up the Tuesday afternoon with our first meal in 5 days. The next morning, back at work, doing the normal job, not feeling tired at all, not feeling low on energy. As a matter of fact, quite hyped. Amazing experience. It's one of the experiences. It's just amazing that cognition just picks up during this whole phase, or this whole program was amazing, really good.
Yeah, awesome. And Sam, what kind of rehab have you been doing on the body? Because you said that the impact on you said the exercise part of it was much tougher than actually the fasting part. So you said you've been doing some rehab and sort of bathing, and tell us a bit about how you've been recovering your body.
So the thing that I struggled with, or there were 2 things, but the worst was the muscle pain of using muscles that I haven't used. The amount of walking that I did, I don't think I did enough walking training because I did a lot of running training. So I did a lot of stretching every morning and every night during the event. I even started stretching at every water stop along the way. And then I got home and I had a marathon 2.5 hour Epsom salt bath. Just kept on topping up the hot water. And I've had Epsom salt baths for 3 days, twice a day since then, and lots of stretching. So I just went back, and then on the 3rd day I started walking again, and then the 4th day I started running and cycling again.
And how are you replenishing electrolytes? So you weren't allowed to have calories, so I'm assuming you couldn't have like bone broth and stuff. Shaun, what were you doing in terms of supplementation and electrolytes and minerals and stuff on the event?
Yeah, I had a specific mix that I had with that replenished sodium, magnesium, and potassium. Many people had their own stuff that they did, or salt tablets or so forth. So specifically, sodium was our big thing, to make sure we get enough sodium in. But interestingly for me as well, the mix that I made didn't have a lot of salt. It wasn't such a salty taste. By day 3, I just mixed a lot of stuff with water. But by day 3, the salty taste became so bad that I actually didn't want to replenish anymore. So it's amazing how the taste just changed. And then the last 2 days of the fast, I didn't replenish as much as I would have normally, and which was quite interesting. So I didn't find that I had any deficiencies, couldn't feel it, and so forth. And also now, after the fact, I just ate normally and didn't do anything specific or special to replenish the minerals. So, and that went well, very good.
And what would you? Yeah. So Sam, how were you different to Shaun?
I had to be much more careful with my electrolyte balance because I was at risk with low blood pressure and low blood glucose. So I had to be a lot more careful with my electrolyte balance. So I had every bottle of water had some salt in it, and I was also replenishing with salt, a mineral capsule that had sodium, potassium, and magnesium in it. So I had to go the other extreme.
And do you know why you had low? Is it that you have low blood sugar, or that you got low blood sugar? Blood pressure.
I'm chronic hypertensive, so in other words, I've always suffered from low blood pressure. Okay,
and so did anyone ever say anything about the impact low carb might have on that for you?
Low carb doesn't have an impact on it. In fact, low carb is beneficial because one of the symptoms of low blood pressure is fatigue. And when I started low carb, my fatigue went away. So the condition is still there, but the symptoms have been negated. But with fasting, it becomes more tricky.
Got it. And what, Shaun? I'm asking you because you are injured. This is not rubbing any of the salt in the wound, but if you could do it again, how would you have done it differently?
Yeah, great question, Jono. I most certainly would have. I've got a much better idea now of where my fat oxidization threshold is. So I most certainly would have stayed within there, because one of the things that we did pick up in our body composition measurement was that I was losing a little bit of muscle mass. So obviously, right in the beginning, when I was going high intensity, my body was saying, "Okay, I need sugar as a fuel." And it was starting to break down some of the proteins in my body to actually be making the glycogen. So that's not something I would want to repeat, and I would go slower. And actually my individual pace for staying under fat oxidization levels is to be at a run, walk trot type thing. That's why really my body is just comfortably burning fat as a fuel and not tying into glycogen store. So that's really where what I would do differently. And most certainly from a preparation perspective, I'd actually prepare myself by walking more and training to walk, because all of my training was about running. And then when I realized that running was depleting my glycogen stores, I had to start walking, and then that's where the pain and aches really started, is to actually start walking when I wasn't properly prepared for it. The fasting side was easy. It was really being able to do that mileage, 30, 32 Ks a day, without being, we were preparing, but I don't think we knew exactly what the impact was of that type of distance on a daily basis.
And interestingly, I had the opposite effect. So my muscle mass went up. I was gaining muscle, but I think at some point it was doing this, and then at some point it did this, and then it started going up and down because we were having those measurements. Was it morning and evening, Shaun? I can't remember now.
Yeah, the body mass. Body composition was in the mornings only.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the data, Sam. You were researching with UWC. What are some of the preliminary data telling you about what happens to you in that kind of situation?
Well, we don't have the comparison data yet. So this is purely us just looking at the data during the testing window. And it's quite confusing to look at it individually, because like I said, my body mass went up, my skeletal mass went up, ketones went up, glucose went down, but we aren't able to see the trends yet, and we aren't able to compare the participants against each other to see what the trends look like. So it's a bit of a mix at the moment until we actually see the data represented holistically.
And what are the takeaways for you as individuals, Shaun? What's going through your mind now as you sort of digest what you went through?
Sure. I mean, my first and immediate response is the amazing machine that our bodies are. It's just unbelievable. If I had to, after my first day of really going hell for leather, that first day in running, I ended up, my blood pressure was at 100 over 62. And I've always had spot on blood pressure, 120 over 80. And at the end of 3.5 hours of running, I couldn't believe that my blood pressure was down. It was very interesting. But having said that, I felt great. It wasn't as if I was, lightheaded or anything like that. So it just felt like my body was adapting according to my environment and the circumstance it was in. And the same thing with after the second day, my blood glucose were way down. It was 1.9 at the end of the day. And normally, if you go to hospital at 1.9 blood glucose, people actually admit you, say, oh, you've got big problems. But no problems, cognition perfect, everything's fine, not a problem. It was just my body is busy working out what it needs to do. And then from day 3, 4, blood glucose back up in the 4s, 4.5, 4.6, 4.7. And then the other thing was ketones, just kept climbing. End of day 6, I was 6.5, my ketone levels. So this amazing machine just kept on coming to the party and making sure that I'm looked after, that my brain is looked after. I felt good from that perspective. Not talking about the legs. The legs were suffering, but the brain was there, and I felt all over from energy perspective good. Not talking about the muscular fatigue. So my takeaway is we've got this fabulous machine that really looks after us so well. And my question is, why do we make it so difficult for this machine to look after us when we are putting so much sugar and inflammatory stuff in it? Just leave it and let it actually do its work and give it the proper foods and the fuels it needs to operate properly.
Totally. And Sam, what are your takeaways?
I think the most surprising thing for me that I'm still struggling to get over, besides the fact that hunger was like a total non-starter. Nobody, we would even talk about food and not get hungry. But the individual surprise for me was that I suffer from a nerve pain in my left foot, which I get for anything over 5Ks, no matter how slow or fast I walk or run. And there was not even a hint of this nerve pain once in 5 days of 5 to 7 hours on my feet every day. That to me was astonishing. And I want to believe that the surge of ketones through my body and the amount of anti-inflammatory benefits that came with that totally obliterated the nerve pain.
I mean, there is an association between neurological disorders and is it? The typical one is epilepsy and the ketogenic diet.
Dementia, Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. It's like not you. One gets super keen on like saying it's conclusive. It's works.
I don't know if it's conclusive, but it's certainly interesting.
Yeah, amazing. And so of all the measurements that did come out, what was the most surprising, or was that what you were talking about just now, Shaun?
Yeah, as far as the measurements concerned, it's for me, it's the interaction or the different ones, the glucose, ketones. We saw cholesterol as well. We only measured total cholesterol. So cholesterol, as we were oxidizing more and more fat, our cholesterol also just started to rise in being able to handle and being involved in the metabolism of fat. But then the way that glucose actually, in my case, went down at really working hard and just came back up again. And at some stage, day 3, glucose and ketones were like sitting quite stable. Glucose 4.5, ketones sitting at about 5.5 actually. And I knew I was oxidizing fat well. I felt really, really good. So measurements, I think the interesting thing for me was my weight loss. I lost 6 kilograms in the 5 days. So I wouldn't advise anybody to go and do that to lose weight. In the week that's gone, I actually picked it right back up again. So it was water loss and all other stuff. So it wasn't real weight loss. We'll see what the final measurement says. As Sam says, we're waiting for the process data to come through. But so many interesting measurements, that we can draw from. One specific one, I was impressed with my ketone level. I love that. It went up over six, which is great. Felt great. Cognition good. Was awesome.
And Sam, any other data that surprised you?
There were a few of us whose blood pressure and blood glucose went way below what would have been generally accepted as healthy, and the researchers were concerned, but the information that we were giving about how great we felt counteracted the number. And so it was always taken together, like, how are you feeling with regards to this number? Like, how are you actually feeling? Okay, let's see how you go. You can go out, but we're going to monitor you. So the symptoms said we should have been feeling crap, and actually we were feeling amazing.
And that isn't that just like the problem that we experience in medicine and health, just actually happening right in front of your eyes? Like, according to this data, you are feeling terrible, but no, I promise I feel great. Well, I'm going to prescribe you with some drugs anyway. Hey, isn't that interesting? Wow.
Yeah.
And so, like, when it comes to the actual event, so we didn't actually talk about what's happening on the actual event. So you woke up in the morning, if you, like, I've done this before, and we'd wake up in the morning and have breakfast as a team, and we'd get in the water and swim, and then have lunch. And, like, what does your day look like if there are no meal times? Like, do you ever sit around the table together and drink a glass of water? How was the schedule mapped out for every day, Shaun?
Well, our schedule was to meet in the morning at 7 o'clock for our daily measurements, which we do. And then we just discuss the strategy of exactly, how we're going to tackle the day. And we'd allow for about an hour for that. And then we'd hop into 1 or 2 vehicles to actually take us out to the point where we actually start the day from. And then we typically split into 2 groups, one a runner's group and a walking group, and we'll complete the distance from there. When we then get home at Kwatu, it depends on how tough the day was. I mean, my second day, Sam, I don't know about yours, but the second day was the worst. It was really, really hot. I literally wanted to hang around just to talk to everybody. But I couldn't. I was just too tired. I mean, I slunk off to my tent at about 7 o'clock in the evening, got into the fetal position with my thumb in my mouth, and I feel very sorry for myself. And the amazing thing was the next morning, 5:30, to wake up to start getting ready again. The restoration was amazing. Got up and ready to do the next day. It was unbelievable. And that typically was what we did, from one day to the next. There most certainly wasn't a socializing around a pot of food, that's for sure. But yeah, we had great.
We were quite careful with the researchers, like, keep the food away. I see nuts on top of the fridge. Move it. was that eggs that's on the fridge? But more of a teasing and joking, actually.
Oh, it made me laugh because I think one of in the WhatsApp group where you were sharing the updates, I laughed a lot because you had a photograph of a pantry, and the pantry had nothing in it. And I was like, imagine going on a 5-day trip and just like not buying a grocery. I think it made like a bag of coffee and a bag of salt, and that was it. That made me laugh. So what is the takeaway? So average Joe is watching this, and so obviously it's like, wow, you've done this extreme thing, but it's more than just a mindset thing. Like, you can push yourself and achieve what you think you can achieve. It's also a statement about how we feel our bodies. What is the takeaway you want others to take with them, knowing that what you've done is possible? Sam?
If I can get somebody to pause and think before putting that piece of food in their mouth, then for me it's been a success. To say that you don't need to be eating 3 square meals and 5 snacks. Give your body a little bit of a break from the digestion and give it a chance to recover. So if that's all it's done is make them second guess about how much they eat, then for me the job is done.
Cool. And Shaun?
Yeah, I think, Jono, I'd like to go a bit more specific than Sam. I agree exactly with what you're saying. Awareness and pause. Listen, do I need to eat what I'm eating, and what is it doing to my body? More specifically, there are so many people, especially in South Africa, definitely, that are suffering from diabetes, for instance, especially type 2 diabetes. And we've shown through this 5 days of not putting any calories into our body can be properly fueled by fat. Now, if you can be fat adapted and you're not taking in a lot of carbohydrate, you actually don't have to chase the carbohydrates and blood sugar with putting in a lot of insulin into your body, which causes its own problems. So there are options. There are better options than purely medicating diabetes. And the biggest impact, in my opinion, and also in my experience in helping other people, is to eat a low carbohydrate diet to help you to manage your condition better.
Yeah. So instead of having like your 5 a day to manage diabetes, you could have 1 every 5 days, like one meal every 5 days, and you'd still be okay.
Yeah, don't have to go to that extreme. We've proven that we can go to the extreme, but you don't have to go to the extreme. Do a bit of intermittent fasting and keep the intake of the carbohydrates low.
Sure.
I think if I can add to that, like if we were talking to Joe Runner, I'd be saying think twice about what you think you need for that run.
Yeah. And let's be honest, stopping at the water station can shave off like 3 or 4 minutes over the course of a run. You don't need that. Yeah, it's amazing. It's a far cry from when I did Ironman a few years ago. I remember just stopping, actually not even like running past and picking up the Coke. I just stopped at the station, and they had like protein bars and bananas, and just sit there and have like a bar one, a banana and whatever. And I honestly think like I would have saved 10 or 15 minutes off my Ironman time, not to mention the crash that you get, because you have all that sugar pulsing through your veins, and then you get thirsty, so you're carrying extra water weight around. It's actually, I'm pretty sure like the event day, which should actually be healthy for you, because I think it actually ends up being an unhealthy day out because of how much crap we throw into our bodies on rest days. So you've flipped that whole thing upside down. It's amazing. Well, that's all I wanted to know. I mean, there's a lot more I want to know, but I think that's all we've got time for. I'm super stoked you guys came to join me. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I hope the message gets out, and that anyone watching this shares it, so that if anyone ever disputes the fact that you can't exercise without food, you can flip this in their face. Yeah. So congrats again, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, Jono, and having us on. And this the same also, if people are interested to know more about the project, at www.fastedfatfueledfreedomrun.com. And we'll also be putting up blogs as to our experiences, and we'll be, when the data is available, we'll be publishing the data there as well in its raw format.
So, and that's on fastedfatfueledfreedomrun.com.
.com.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Very excited. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Cheers.
Bye.